Azerbaijanis in Russia. Russian Azerbaijanis are Azerbaijani people in the Russian Federation, and are Russian citizens or permanent residents of ethnic Azerbaijani background. Aside from the large Azeri community native to Russia's Dagestan Republic, the majority of Azeris in Russia are fairly recent immigrants. Azeris started settling in Russia around the late 19th century, but the migration intensified after World War II, and especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. According to the 2010 All-Russian Population Census, there are 603,070 Azeris residing in Russia. However, the actual numbers may be much higher due to the arrival of guest workers in the post-Soviet era. The estimated total Azeri population of Russia as of 2002 might have reached as many as 3 million people, with more than 1.5 million of them living in Moscow, though in the following decade there was a tendency for many Azeris to move back to Azerbaijan. The majority of post-1991 ethnic Azeri migrants have come to Russia from rural Azerbaijan, Georgia and Armenia. Today, most provinces of Russia have more or less significant Azeri communities, the biggest ones, according to official numbers, residing in Dagestan, Moscow, Khanty-Mansi, Krasnoyarsk, Rostov-on-the-Don, Saratov, Sverdlovsk, Samara, Stavropol, etc. Dagestan. As of 2010, 130,919 Azeris lived in the Dagestan Republic, which makes them the region's sixth largest ethnic group and 4.5% of its total population. Most of them are natives of the city of Derbent, living in the historical Khorda Mahal and making up about one-third of the city's population. Azeris constitute 58% of the population of the Debensky district, 18% of that of the Basaransky district, 2.35% in the Kisliarsky district, 1.64% in the Magaram-Kent rayon, and 1.56% in the Rutal rayon. The rest live in the cities of Makartkala, Kashviut, Binsk and Kizlyar. Among cultural benefits available to Dagestani Azeris, there are newspapers and magazines printed in the Azeri language, 72 public schools where Azeri is taught as a second language, and the Azeri Folk Theatre in Derbent, founded in 1904. Historically, Azeris of Dagestan were engaged in carpet weaving, currying, jewelry, and copper utensils making. Rural Azeris were occupied in farming. Most Azeris of Dagestan are Shia Muslim, although Hanafi and Shafi'i Sunnis are found among the rural population. There is a small number of Naqshbandi Sufism adherents. In 2000, in a presidential decree, Azeris along with 13 other ethnic groups of Dagestan received the status of a native community of Dagestan. As of 2011, there are 4 Azeri members of the Dagestan State Council. Beginning in 2014, the Azeri population of Derbent voiced its concern due to the government's indifference towards the poor state of infrastructure and frequent acts of vandalism and unauthorized removal of Azeri cultural landmarks in the city. These concerns led to protests and demands for a better representation at the municipal level. American political analyst Paul Goebel characterized these events as the boiling point in the interethnic relations in Derbent and did not exclude the possibility of them leading to an ethnic conflict that would threaten to extend across the Russian-Azerbaijani border. Azerbaijanis in Derbent. After the disintegration of the Caliphate, the city of Derbent and the surrounding area became an independent emirate closely allied with the neighboring state of Shirvan. During this period, the emirate became destination for the migration of numerous Turkic tribes. This factor, as well as the influence of the Seljuk Empire, ensured the spread of an Oghuz Turkic idiom in Derbent already in the 11th century. The Mongol invasion put an end to the emirate's independence for the next 2 centuries. In the 15th century, Ibrahim Maya, who hailed from Derbent, became the new ruler of Shirvan and incorporated Derbent into Shirvan. The ethnic makeup of Derbent remained unchanged until the city became part of the Safavid Empire in the early 16th century. The Safavid rule was characterized with active resettlement policies aimed at securing Shia Muslim dominance in the conquered lands. In 1509, 500 Karamanli Turkish families from Tabriz settled in Derbent. An unknown number of Turkish speakers from the Kerchi tribe were resettled here in 1540. Half a century later, 400 more families of the Turkish-speaking Bayat clan were relocated to Derbent on the orders of Abbas I. Finally, in 1741, Nadir Shah relocated Turkish speakers from the Mikri clan to Derbent. It is noteworthy that by 1870 the settlers were all regarded as speaking a common language, Azeri. Due to the Shia adherents, the new migrants were referred to by contemporary historians as Persians, a term that was erroneously applied to Shia Azeris of Dagestan way into the 20th century. Adam Oliaris, who visited the region around 1635, described Shirvan as a state of many peoples, all of whom, however, besides their own language, also spoke Turkish. At the time of Peter the Great's conquest of the Caspian coastline in 1722, the city of Derbent was predominantly inhabited by Azeris. The northern part of the Derbent rayon was historically populated by the Tarakama, a Turkish-speaking people akin to the Karapapak, who were sometimes classified as a separate ethnic group until the 20th century. In Dagestan, they are also sometimes referred to as Padas. The Tarakama originated in various parts of Shirvan and were resettled by Khan Muhammad of Kaitag to the north of the city of Derbent around 1600. From then on, the area inhabited by them has been referred to as the Tarakama Mahal and constituted an administrative unit until the early 20th century. The district included 10 villages. In 1736, around 300 Tarakama families from Kaitag advanced further across the Sulik River and settled on the Terek Valley in 3 villages, where they later mixed with the Kumiks. The rest gradually assimilated among Azerbaijanis and today for the most part consider themselves Azerbaijani. They are mainly Sunni and speak a variety of Azeri, close to the dialect of Shamaki. Such assimilation notably affected not only Turkish-speaking peoples of Dagestan. In the past, southern Dagestan had a large Tat population which originally spoke an Iranian language like other Tats. In 1866, they numbered 2,500 people and by 1929 lived in 7 villages, including Zidjan, Bilgadi, Verkhny Chalgan and Rukal. However, by the beginning of the 20th century most of them had become Azeri-speaking and assumed Azeri identity in the later decades. Today, 16 out of 40 settlements in Derbent are majority Azeri populated, and in 9 more, Azeris constitute either a relative majority or a significant minority. Beriki, Delishoban, Velikent, Verkhny Chalgan, Nizhny Chalgan, Sabnova, Zemikent, Zidyan Kazmalia, Matagi Kazmalia, Kala, Mugati, Mizaim, Pada, Kamuna, Rukal, Tadlia, Karadali, Bilgadi, Belidji, Arablinski, Arablia, Gedjuk, China, Nugdi, Rubiz, Salak, Aluterakim, Bizarre. The town of Mamtkala, Derbent was still a predominantly Azeri town in 1897, with 9,767 persons constituting 66.7% of its population. Decades later, even though the numbers continued to grow due to heavy immigration in the town, as of 2010, Azeris constituted just 32.3% of its total population, with 38,523 persons. Azerbaijanis in Dagestan. In the historical region of Dagestan, ethnic Azeris populate the left bank of the Rubas River. The growth and establishment of ethnic Azeris in this region has heavily depended on assimilation processes. In 1876, many Dagestanans were already in the process of switching from Dagestan to Azeri as the first language. In addition, from the Middle Ages, the population of a number of villages in Dagestan, namely Arablia, Gimidi, Dav, Uc, and Kemek, consisted of ethnic Arabs who were gradually being absorbed by the neighboring population, mainly Azeri, such as in Uc. In 1929, Kemek was listed among Tat-populated villages, whereas Gimidi was described as mixed Tat and Azeri. These Tats, in turn, were assimilated by Azeris in the following decades. Arablia, which is now part of the Kurak Rayon, currently has mixed Lesbian and Azeri population. Residents of Dav retained the knowledge of Arabic as a first language until the 1930s, after which they also integrated linguistically and ethnically into the Azeri surrounding. Currently, ethnic Azeris constitute majority in the villages of Maraga, Hilipenjuk, Sanak, Arak, Uc, Dav, and Zil. The villages of Arkit and Gufik, as well the district capital Kukni, are mixed Azeri and Dagestan. Azeris of Sanak, Arak, Uc, and Kukni are normally bilingual in Azeri and Dagestan, showing preference for Dagestan when talking to the Dagestan neighbors even if the latter know Azeri. Azerbaijanis in Rutel. Nizhny Katruk is the only Azeri village in the Rutel Rayon. Azeris of Nizhny Katruk consider themselves descendants of the people of Shevan, who were captured by the mountaineers during one of the raids into the plains around 1700, taken to the Shamkalate of Kazi Kumak and made subjects of the Shamkal. According to a local legend, only 2 of the original 7 settlers were Azeri, though it was the Azeri identity that came to dominate. The village today consists of 7 quarters, populated by people of various waves of pre-Tsarist immigration. Azeris of Rutel speak a distinct dialect of Azeri, which displays a heavy lac substratum. The first newspaper in Rutel, Gizil Choban, established in 1932, was printed in Azeri. Role of the Azerbaijani language and culture. For centuries, Azeri has been the lingua franca of southern Dagestan, used both to communicate with Azeris and with mountaineers whose languages were unrelated or considered unintelligible. In the 16th century, it became widespread in the Samur Valley, and by the 19th century, the Azeri language spread across all of the foothill and lowland regions of Dagestan, and was one of the languages of trade and interethnic communication, along with Kumyk and Avar. Historically, the peoples of southern Dagestan were oriented toward the cultural and behavioral norms of Azerbaijan, as well as depended on its economy. In the course of history, they found themselves almost fully immersed in the Azeri linguistic and cultural milieu, despite the official language of the region was Persian. According to Dagestani anthropologist Magomed Khan Magomedkhanov, through the Azeri language, the people of this region achieved material benefits, satisfaction of cultural needs, as well as creative and spiritual inspiration. Lesbian, Dagestan, Rutel, and Agul Kurds were creating poetry in Azeri already in the 17th century. Beginning in 1917, the works of comic authors have displayed influences of Azeri literature. First plays in the amateur lesbian theatre established in 1907 were performed in the Azeri language. Azeri music and singing traditions played a major role in the cultural integration of the peoples of southern Dagestan. Music was performed through Azeri folk instruments, such as tar and kamancha, and the Azeri muffam became a well-celebrated genre of music among the peoples of Dagestan. Lesbian music in particular shares many similar features with Azeri music. Azeri songs were played and performed at Tabasaran weddings as late as in the 1980s. According to Belarusian Jewish traveler Joseph Cherny, who visited the region in 1870, mountain Jews of Dagestan had largely adopted Azeri cultural values and lifestyles, and even read liturgical prayers with a Tat translation and an Azeri tune. As for the lesbian Rutbul, Sakha and other Dagestani-speaking population, the Azeri language affected the cultural sphere and was a primary source for many loanwords, leaving their everyday speech behavior mostly intact. The Tabasaran language is considered the most influenced by Azeri, which has contributed many nouns, adjectives, adverbs, the verb forms and even auxiliary words and morphemes. In 1861, the first secular school in southern Dagestan opened in the lesbian village of Akti, and Azeri was taught there along with Russian. The learned masses preferred to use Arabic in formal communication, which is why in 1920, Arabic was chosen over the largely unwritten indigenous languages of Dagestan as a means of public education. The atheist policies of the Soviet government, however, attempted to eliminate religion from everyday life. Arabic soon became seen as a link between the Dagestanis and their Islamic heritage. Thus, in 1923, Azeri became the language of education in all of Dagestan. According to Alibek Takogodi, Dagestani People's Commissar of Justice in the 1920s, local Dagestani languages were not taken seriously as a means of nation-building due to their excessive number. Azeri retained its status until 1928, when education in other local languages, as well as in Russian, was introduced. Azeri remained as the most popular second language in southern Dagestan at least until the 1950s, spoken with various degrees of popularity as far north as in the Tindi villages of Sumada. It is noteworthy that historically among Tindis and especially Aguls, who lived relatively far from the Azeri settlements, usually only males spoke Azeri or any second language, and only those who visited the lowlands for seasonal labor. Beginning in the 1950s, the use of Azeri as a common second language and lingua franca has been in decline, as it could no longer compete with Russian. As of 2010, 13,648 lesbians, 5,665 Tabasarans, 3,105 Avars, and 1,379 Dag were living in Russia claimed speaking Azeri, mostly as a second language. In Dagestan, the number of non-Azeri speakers of the Azeri language was still in the thousands in 2010. According to the Dagestani constitution, the official languages of Dagestan are Russian and all local languages, though only 14 of the republic's numerous languages have writing systems, one of them being Azeri. Rest of Russia. Diplomatic missions and merchants from Shirvan and the Safavid Empire first appeared in Russia in the 14th and 15th century. Despite the Russian Empire conquering what is now Azerbaijan in the early 19th century and its incorporation into the Soviet Union in 1920, the Azeri population did not tend to leave its traditional areas of settlement until the second half of the 20th century. However, isolated communities of Azeris in Russia can trace their existence to the mid-19th century. The population of maritime Caspian regions has historically had strong economic ties with the city of Astrakhan on the northern Caspian shore. In particular, Azeris, known to the local population as Persians or Shamoki Tartars, were represented in the city already in 1879, when there was about 1,000 of them. The community grew in the Soviet times and in 2010 consisted of 5,737 people, making Azeris the fourth largest ethnicity in the oblast and 31% of its total population. The religious life of the Azeris in Astrakhan is centered around the 1909 Kriushi Mosque, which was closed down in 1932, and recently reopened and renovated as a Shiite mosque and named the Baku Mosque. Azeri oil industrialist, first guild merchant Shamsi Asadullayev, founder of the Asadullayev Trade Affairs, was based in Moscow from 1903 until his death in 1913. He allocated money for the construction of a secular school for Muslim boys and girls and a Muslim community center in Moscow. The four-story building erected after his death on Maly Tartarsky Lane came to be known as the Asadullayev House. It is currently owned by the Tatar National Cultural Autonomy of Moscow. Similarly to all Muslims of the Caucasus and Central Asia, Azeris were exempt from compulsory military service in the Russian Imperial Army, but were required to pay a special tax. Those willing to serve were allowed to enlist in irregular units, such as the Savage Division. At the same time, there was no restriction for Azeris to be trained as officers. In 1805, Mahmud Hassan Aga Javanshir became one of the first Russian major generals of Azeri origin. Ethnic Azeri officers commanded Russian troops in a series of wars, including the Russo-Persian Wars of 1804 to 1813 and 1826 to 1828, Russo-Turkish Wars of 1828 to 1829 and 1877 to 1878, the suppression of the Hungarian Revolution of 1848, the Crimean War, the Caucasian War, and the Russian conquest of Central Asia. In 1905, Azeri political figures were among those who established the first Islamic Party of Russia, Ittifaq al-Muslimin, in the city of Nizhny Novgorod. An Azeri member, lawyer Alamardan Topkubashov, was elected its leader. The party was officially registered in 1908. There were 6 ethnic Azeris elected in the State Duma of the Russian Empire in the 1906 Russian legislative election, 6 more in the February 1907 election and 1 in each of the following elections. For the past decade, Azeris have played significant roles in developing Russian economy. Azerbaijani geologist Farman Salmanov, who later established himself in Moscow, discovered rich oil reserves in Siberia which had previously been considered as an unlikely oil-bearing region. With many of them involved in entrepreneurship, they have been employed in major economical areas, such as trade and oil industry. Among Russia's 100 richest people ranked by Forbes in 2004, 3 ethnic Azeris were ranked 10, 66 and 74. Azeris have established numerous cultural communities, the largest one being the All-Russian Azeri Congress and the Azeri Federal National Culture Autonomy, which control smaller communities across Russia. In addition, the Moscow Public Secondary School number 157 is set up for students with keen interest in the Azeri language and culture. A 2005 study indicated noticeable social differences between 2 groups of Azeris: those who are native to have lived considerable parts of their lives in Moscow and those who are recent immigrants. About half of the people in the first group have a post-secondary degree, whereas among immigrant Azeris only 25% do. Fluency in the Russian language is characteristic of virtually all of those in the first group, while almost one-third of those in the second group speak very limited Russian. About half of Azeri newcomers are engaged in commerce and service sector, compared to the native and earlier immigrant Azeris who tend to pursue careers in sciences, healthcare, education and the arts. In general, among ethnic Caucasus diasporas in Moscow, Azeris stand out as the least integrated into Russian society. They have been described as the strongest adherents to the traditions and marriages within their own ethnic community compared to local Armenians, Georgians, Ukrainians, and Tatars. According to a 2006 survey, 71% of Moscow Azeris described themselves as being religious. A great number of them have retained Azerbaijani citizenship and is willing to relocate back to Azerbaijan at some point. The 2010 Russian census saw a decrease in the number of Azeris in Russia compared to the previous census, with 603,070 Azeris compared to 621,840 in 2002. Over 97% of Azeris living in Russia know the Russian language. Close to 84% considers Azeri the first language. Among Azeris of Dagestan, the number of speakers of Azeri as a first language is over 99%. Discrimination. Like many other people who originated in the Caucasus, despite the fact that the term has a different dominant meaning in English, Azeris often face Caucasophobia, which might result in severe discrimination and violence. Notable Azerbaijanis of Russia: Tamia Abbasova, racing cyclist, 2004 Olympic silver medalist; Gaida Jamal, philosopher; Eman Garibov, artistic gymnast; Ruslan Gasimov, judoka; Murad Husinov, football player; Stalik Kankashev, chef, photographer, cooking writer; Georgy Mamedov, diplomat, currently ambassador to Canada; Ramiz Mamedov, retired football player; Karim Mamedbeyov, revolutionary and early Soviet politician; Timur Rodriguez, showman, singer; Alexander Samedov, football player; Ramil Shadeyev, football player; Tofig Zulfugarov, former Azerbaijani foreign minister; Azerbaijanis born elsewhere: Aras Agalarov, businessman, billionaire, founder of Crocus International; Emin Agalarov, businessman, singer and songwriter; Farkad Akhmedov, politician, businessman, founder of North Gas; Vajid Alekperov, president of the leading Russian oil company Lukoil; Avrami Aslanbegov, Russian admiral; Zafar Guliyev, wrestler, 1996 Olympic bronze medalist; Habibullah Husinov, Soviet colonel and hero of the Soviet Union; Rustam Ibragimbekoff, screenwriter, Academy Award winner; Alexander Kazembek, 19th-century Russian linguist and scholar; Karim Kerimov, head of Soviet space program; Muslim Magomayev, singer; Eman Makhmudov, football player; Enver Mamedov, Soviet diplomat, mass media manager; Tahir Mamedov, TV host, entertainer, actor, comedian and singer; Ilgar Mamedov, fencer, Olympics winner 1988 and 1996; Haydar Mamedaliyev, wrestler, 2004 Olympic silver medalist, world champion; Musa Manarov, astronaut, flight engineer on Soyuz trademark 4; Hussein Khan Nakshivansky, cavalry general and general adjutant of the Emperor of Russia; Avuga Orujov, wrestler, 1992 Olympic bronze medalist; Farman Salmanov, geologist who first discovered oil fields in Siberia; Tahir Salahov, artist; Mirza Abdul Rahim Talibov Tabrizi, intellectual and social reformer.